Hello and welcome Exiles. Today I get a bit of a different video because it's going to be about probably one of the best items I've ever made in Path of Exile. Now how did I get here? Well, the moral of the story is I was flat broke and on the verge of thinking I really want to upgrade this Righteous Fire character, but I also don't want to farm currency for it, so I broke down and I sold the Giga Guardian gear. Fortunately, it sold for a lot more than I was expecting, which basically meant I could fund this character quite well. The bad part is that I don't really have any self-control when it comes to investing into Righteous Fire. I really don't, and I tend to go overboard with trying to make just really perfect gear when it comes to Righteous Fire. I just don't have the kind of control necessary to not do so. And that's how we went to make this amulet, which I would think is the best Righteous Fire amulet I've ever made. And I made some pretty good amulets in my day when it comes to Righteous Fire. I was making Righteous Fire builds in Harvest when we had access to way more powerful crafting than we do now. And this amulet, in my opinion, tops the previous ones I've crafted. Now, the reasons for that, in my opinion, is A, we've never had +1 all skill. Never had +1 all skill gems. This is significantly more powerful than +1 dex or +1 int because it is applying to all your skill gems. That way, if you're doing something like Fire Trap, like Fire Trap, you can then be playing with Fire Trap and Righteous Fire, and both of them are getting +2 rather than just one skill getting +2 and the other skill getting +1. So that's the first part. The second part is dot multi was never a suffix back in Harvest. It didn't exist. You could get 20 fire dot multi, but 26 dot multi takes the cake. It beats 20 dot multi. So even though I had better crafting powers back in the day, I have better mods in the affix pool than I did previously. So that's why I think this is better than the amulets I've crafted previously. Now, I wanted to go through basically all the steps I took to craft this amulet because a lot of people were asking me. I did a whole stream where I went through and crafted the amulet. You can watch the VOD if you're really curious. Watch me do it step by step. But I figured I would go ahead and write down all the steps if you wanted to craft this yourself, which I'm not sure to recommend because sanity, you'll lose your sanity. Now, to start off with, step 1 we have here is fracture the dot multi. This means you have to buy a marble amulet, divine up the dot multi to the highest roll, and then fracture it. On TFT, the fractures were going for about 10x for a 1 out of 5, or for 1 out of 3 if you're fracturing a suffix, it was like 15x. This price is all subject to change. It could go up, it could go down. I have no idea. Point is, average cost here, expected cost is around 45 to 50x just to get the fracture. The fracture that is dot multi, that's 50x, and that's all you have. Next up, we have alt spamming to +1 skill gems. This is the part where you lose your sanity. Initially, when I had planned on making this amulet, I was under the impression that you could still imprint fractured items. I didn't know this was changed. Apparently, I found this out after I hit +1 skill for the first time. I found out that you can no longer imprint fractured items, which that means every time I annul the +1 skill or I mess up the amulet and I have to start over, that means instead of just using an imprint beast and getting to go back and keep crafting, which is a lot cheaper than 2.5x, I'm spending 2,500 alts, and this is arguably the bigger cost. This is the part that sucks about crafting this amulet is, on average, you'll see when I go over kind of like expected tries to hit the T1 life and stuff, you're going to be doing this step 2 on average about 10 times. That's 25,000 alterations. That's a lot of spamming alterations. There's a good chance you might roll over the +1 skill a couple times, and then you're just losing your sanity. So this was the part that I was basically, after I found out I was going to have to be doing this step multiple times, I was like, oh, I'm not sure I want to keep going through with this, but I said I was going to craft the best softcore amulet today. I'm going to keep going, but I'm not sure I'm going to have the sanity for it. So that's a huge cost to crafting this amulet. Next up, step 3 is basically regal. If you get a suffix, you're guaranteed to do a prefixes can't be changed scour, which you need to clean off the extra mod. If you get a prefix, then you have to take the 50-50 of going back to step 2, which is basically, oh great, I get to spam another 2,500 alts just to hit the +1 all skill jump. So a lot of pain can be inflicted there. Then on to step 4, you're multi-binding the prefixes you're multi-binding the item with prefixes, and suffixes can't be changed. The reason for doing this is when you do this, it allows you to use Reforge Life, and the only thing that can happen is you get a life mod on the prefix pool. If you do something like prefixes can't be changed, plus Reforged Life more common. You could get extra mods in your prefix pool, which you're going to have to annul, and that might break your all spell, that might break your life. You have the possibility of getting your guaranteed life roll to be on the suffix pool, which means you did that craft and you got maybe a bricked extra prefix. You didn't even get a life roll, sort of things like this. This is the way of guaranteeing you're always rolling for a life roll, and at that point you're guaranteed not to get an extra bad suffix or an extra bad prefix, in which case you would have to annul. Say you hit the T1 life but you get an extra bad prefix, you have to annul, and then you null off the T1 life. Well, there goes your one T1 life you're going to get out of every 11 or 10 tries. So that's what this step 4 is for. So step 5 is Reforging Life. It's about a 1 out of 10.75 to hit T1 life if you account for all the life rolls and the Fizz Leech rolls. This, on average, I think maybe 4 of these tries, you're not hitting T1 life, but you're getting a bad life and you're trying to annul. Because whenever you get bad life, you have to annul to try to go again for the T1 life. So the idea here is, if out of the 5 of the tries, we get an extra try because we annul off the bad life, versus 5 of the tries are either we're annulling off the +1 skill so we have to start over, or it's the 1 try where we finally hit the T1 life. That's how I kind of averaged out the expected cost. That's not really mathematically accurate, but it'll give us a decent idea of what we can reasonably somewhat expect. I didn't really want to set up the formula for... Point is, and don't worry, it's not mathematically accurate, but it's mostly accurate. So the expected cost here is about 81x. That's including basically doing step 1 through 5 until you hit the T1 life. Step 2 through 5. That doesn't account for the 50x you already spent. So that's all we're doing for the biggest expense part of the thing, is getting T1 life with +1 all skill, an open prefix, and the fractured dot multi. This is the hardest crux of the whole amulet, and you can see we're 130x in. That's a lot of expense, and if you get unlucky, you can be way more in terms of expense, or if you get lucky, you can be a little bit less. I personally got lucky crafting this amulet because I hit T1 life, I think my 4th try on doing the Reforged Life, so I got lucky. I miracled my way out of doing much more alteration spamming than I really had to do, which was a miracle for me. At this point, it's going to be pretty smooth sailing, guaranteed things, no alt spamming. So step 6, we remove the crafted modifiers we have on there. We have on basically the prefix suffix can't be changed multi-mod, and instead we go ahead and multi-mod plus cannot roll attack. What this does is it fills up your suffix pool. So all you have on the amulet at this point is +1 to all skill, T1 life, dot multi-mod, and cannot roll attack. This guarantees if we do an augment fire, the only fire mods on the prefix pool are flat fire to attacks and +1 fire spell. If you can't roll attacks, you're guaranteed to get +1 fire spell. So that's how we get the perfect prefixes. Perfect prefixes are done. Check, mark, there. Next up, we have what is a reasonably expensive cost, which is getting T1 Chaos Res on the item. You do prefixes can't be changed plus Reforged Chaos. Arguably, this average cost should be a little bit higher because there is the chance you get an extra affix while doing this, in which case you then have to do a keep prefixes reforge, and then another prefix can't be changed, and another Reforged Chaos, but I didn't even include that extra cost there because I have a little bit of savings in terms of, I estimated this maybe a little bit higher on average than what it would be. So that's what you do to get T1 Chaos Res. And then the final step of this whole project is prefixes can't be changed plus Ashling. If you self-farm the Ashling, then that's not cost to you, but if you're buying it on TFT, then this, instead of being 2 times 2x, would be 2 times 4x, because it's 2x for the prefixes can't be changed, and 2x for the Ashling. So, you can change that around depending on your expected cost if you want to farm the Ashling yourself. I said, on average, we're going to have to get T1 Chaos Res twice, because you could always get the scenario where you remove the Chaos Res and not the suffixes or prefixes can't be changed, in which case, on average, maybe you're at 28x to get to the part where you're unveiling a suffix. At this point, you could get bad suffixes. You could get mind throwing speed, you could get attack and cast speed, you could get maybe attributes you don't need. Maybe you don't need Dex and Int and you get Dex and Int. There are a lot of scenarios where you get a mod you don't really want, and in that case, you're basically going to have to repeat this step here with the additional prefixes can't be changed, reforge, or reforge keep prefixes to basically open up and then restart doing the put on Chaos Res. if you do hit the unveil for the first time, the average expected cost is 172x based on my napkin math for crafting this amulet. So the moral of the story here is I had not quite 172x. I probably shouldn't have even attempted this craft, but I can't help myself. I am a sucker for crafting good items for Righteous Fire. This is going to blow out my budget for Righteous Fire. Obviously, this is no longer even close to affordable because this is just ridiculous. I think what I'll end up doing, because I do like this Righteous Fire Raider, it's been working really smoothly. When I approach the making a guide stage, I am going to go through, try to work out, hey, what do we need to do to make this budget? And then also maybe test out what is this build going to feel like if I go for more budget gear, and then also try to maybe give a showcase of that, so that way you know going into it, okay, the showcase here is with his GG gear RF, min-maxed, and this is what it looks like if you have a little bit more reasonable gear, stuff like that. So that's kind of my plans with this. This amulet, I think, is probably the best amulet in softcore Arch Nemesis trade. It's not the best RF amulet in the game. I did a little bit of digging, and I found one that is better, but it is in standard, and that's this amulet here. I'm sure it's up for a mirror fee for something. So I was going to say, if you wanted to mirror my amulet, you can. I would charge like a 5x fee. I don't really care about making money off of it. It'd be nice to get a little bit extra currency back from all the stuff I put into it, in which case I could fund future builds. But that being said, mirrors are like 200x right now. You'd be spending at a loss. You would save yourself like the pain of 25,000 alterations or whatever, but you'd be losing, I don't know, 20x on average. And especially as mirrors get more expensive, that difference in price between crafting it yourself, maybe you're okay with T2 Life, that'll end up making the cost significantly lower. Stuff like that, you can consider crafting your own amulet, but I wanted to keep that option open. I like the Righteous Fire bros. I want to hook them up. If you want a good amulet and you don't want to craft it yourself, you can, but I just figured I'd leave that open. But ultimately, this is clearly not a mirror tier amulet. There's better amulets that exist on standard. Right now, I think it's the best amulet in Arch Nemesis softcore, but for all I know, there's a better one out there that exists. Maybe you don't care about the non-damaging ailment effect. Personally, I like it a lot for the extra minus res from Scorch. And then if I do end up making an Elementalist, which I probably won't, then I get double benefit, because Elementalist, you can get crazy shock values with the Shaper of Storms. And then we get a little bit of chill if we're using Frost Shield, which I might end up using in the build. Stuff like that. Anyways, this is just a little video I wanted to make talking about my love for crafting cool gear for Righteous Fire, breaking down my crafting steps for doing, creating this amulet, for example. And then, of course, when I do end up, making the guide on this character, because I think it's good enough to be worthy of making more of, a full-out guide on it, I'll try to do this sort of thing where I give crafting steps like, hey, if you wanted to craft something like the shield I'm crafting here, I'll go over the steps to do that. Hey, if you want to craft something like the helmet I'm crafting here, hey, I'll go over the steps on how to craft that. Stuff like that I like to include in my guides, just step-by-step processes to help teach people to do crafting, or help people basically if they had a good idea of how to do a lot of stuff, but they needed a little bit of help or a little bit extra help on making their helmets, etc. I always like to do that because crafting is generally cheaper than buying items, in my opinion. If you're buying all your gear, you're usually paying a premium. Crafters like to make a lot in a reasonably large amount of money for their time crafting. So usually, if you craft it yourself, you can save some money. So I always like to advocate for that, and that's why I include steps to crafting. And one of the fun things about this amulet is I equip it, and all of a sudden, I have an attribute problem. So I need to... I was going to showcase, oh look, the build's so good with this amulet, but I need to fix my attributes before I can even use my amulet. So we're going to get there eventually. Hopefully I'll get an update video for you guys in the next day or so here on all the sorts of giga investment I've done for min-maxing my gear. And yeah, I'm just excited with how the character's going. I'm having a lot. This is a really smooth Righteous Fire playstyle. It's very tanky, very feels good. Probably not the most OP clear. I think it's not quite on the level of an RF bomber in terms of just chain exploding stuff. It doesn't do that, but it just feels good. You just run through packs. You get these nice Ring of Fires from Legacy of Fury. I'm really falling in love with these boots. They're just fun to play with, I think. But yeah, that's the semi-update, talk about how I crafted this amulet and how it's probably the best item I've ever personally made. Just want to share that with you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, thank you for watching. Take care, Exiles.